We started to learn yesterday about the difference between uh, Yitzchak and Abraham, and that Yitzchak's main service of Hashem was um, digging wells. So digging wells means that he tried to reveal spirituality from within the world, just like when you dig for water, you're trying to reveal the water that's beneath the earth. And Avram revealed godliness from above to below. He tried to bring Hashem's truth to the lowest kind of people. So yesterday we were focusing on the general meaning of above to below versus below to above. The analogy that we gave was revelation from above to below is sort of like a miracle. Something which is otherworldly comes down to the world that impacts us very powerfully and it's very moving when you see a miracle. On the other hand, since it's something otherworldly, precisely because it's otherworldly, it's fleeting. On the other hand, when there's something that we change within, we change the way we think, and we're elevated, so the change is more lasting. Today, Mr. Shem, we're going to see the advantage of each of them. There isn't a virtue in both in from above to below and below to above, not only in the power of the revelation, but also where the revelation takes place. Who is affected by a revelation from above to below? Everybody. A revelation that comes from Hashem, that Hashem sends to this world, seeing a miracle, an obvious display of God's presence, is something that affects all kinds of people. Of course, Amalek is someone who always doubts whether a miracle took place, and even if it did take place, Amalek tries to cool us off and say that it wasn't such a big deal, it shouldn't change our lives. But objectively, a miracle is something where Hashem exposes himself in such a clear way, in such a vivid way, that it affects kol amiyart. As the pasuk says, "Man das kol amiyart Hashem Elokim," in order that all Hashem reveals himself, that everyone should know that Hashem is God. So in a similar way, Avram Avinu revealed Hashem to everybody. Everyone is affected by Avram's revelation, Avram's persona, Avram's words. Yitzchak, on the other hand, he revealed godliness from within the world. He tried to make people to become elevated to hear the message. So which sounds like a virtue because it's internal. On the other hand, if you have to go somewhere to hear the message, and the place where you were isn't able to receive it. It's true that Yitzchak's service of Hashem to reveal godliness from within the world is more profound in the sense that it's deeper. But if we were to talk about quantity, about places it can reach, it can't reach everywhere. Think about the fact that after Avram passed away, when Yitzchak came to the scene, the people that Avram impacted left. They weren't able to handle this transition of Yitzchak's new demonstration of their connection to godliness. Yitzchak's kind of revelation doesn't work for everybody. Not everyone's willing to make those steps to become elevated to hear the message. So while Abraham's model of revelation affects all places and it's deficient in its longevity, Yitzchak's revelation maybe have an advantage in longevity, maybe has an advantage in its integrity, in its permanence, in it entering a person in a deep and internal, profound way. But it's deficient in who it can reach, because it can't reach everybody, because not everyone is ready to make the move. And think about it, even when you make the move, the place where you were isn't able to handle where you're going. It's something that requires you to decide that you're going to go along with it, but not to receive it in the place you were. Just on a practical, simple level, if you're ready to learn a chapter of Tanya let's say, for example, learning Tanya is more of a Yitzchak kind of thing to do, to learn a new path in serving Hashem and to be inspired by a new idea. New ideas are very powerful and very meaningful, but a miracle is something that doesn't have, you don't need a chapter of Tanya for a miracle. Just like as Rabbi Yossi Reber always says, an army moves on its stomach. And when you invite someone for a Friday night dinner, you don't have to have too much inspiration in your words. The inspiration comes from the chicken soup and from the good food. In a similar way, the inspiration of Avraham doesn't need to be explained. Avram doesn't need to be unpacked. Avram just reveals to everyone where they are. On the other hand, to get to Yitzchak, to be able to integrate what Yitzchak is trying to tell you, you have to want to listen to him and go along with him. You have to leave where you are. Let's see inside. We're on page 209, the first paragraph of the second column. In each of these two models of serving Hashem, from above to below, or from below to above, there's an advantage that the other one does not have. When there is a revelation from above to below, the physical, the reality here is influenced from what is being sent above, but there's no profound change in the lower place. So too, in regards to Avraham, when the Arabs who visited Avram's tent announced God is the creator of the world, God's the master of the world itself is godly, their announcement wasn't because of their own perspective, it was because of Avram, it wasn't because of them. Avram caused them to have this perspective. It wasn't something that they themselves reached. It was all because of Avram. A story I shared with you, I don't know if you remember, a little while ago, about a Hasidic Rebbe in the time of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Rav Chaikel. And one of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim lived in the town with a Chassid of Rav Chaikel. And he was always changing in his service of Hashem, as we all are. As a Moshe Valenker, who was also a Chassid, Alter Rebbe used to say, a Chassid is like a portrait. I'm sorry. A oil misher, someone who is Chassidically challenged, is like a portrait. They're always the same. A portrait, he couldn't pronounce the letter Reish. He used to say a potiet in Yiddish. A portrait, always the same. But a chassid like a worm, goes up, it goes down. It's not always the same. And this chassid of the Alter Rebbe was jealous of Reb Chaikel's chassid, who was always on fire. So the Alter Rebbe told him that he shouldn't be jealous because it's not that he is praying to Hashem. Chaikel davened in him. Chaikel, his Rebbe, is davening within him. So too over here, it wasn't that the Arabs recognized Hashem. It was that Avram recognized Hashem. Avram's recognition was burning in them. He was able to bring some of his persona into them. There was no profound change in them. It was all about him. Lefichach, next paragraph, Lamrish Avram Hevili de Kachsha by Mikir Dulase, Hadilui Gorem Lisrem Musim Shaflusa, Mehusim Shalem, the Shalamata, Abaim Kimkerem. So although Avraham brought them to recognize Hashem, he didn't elevate them from where they were. They still remained in their lowly state. They still were exactly the way they were before, but temporarily they were recognizing Hashem. They were announcing the greatness of Hashem, but it was all because of the experience with Avram. It wasn't something that actually lifted them up. It was just something that they were just affected by because of the moment, because of the circumstance. On the other hand, Yitzchak is about elevating from below to above. So that the bond between what is below, between the world, and what is above, with godliness, stems from this bond, stems from what is below. And there's a change from within. What is below changes and is elevated and bonds with godliness. Just like when you dig for water, you're not pouring water in from somewhere else. Rather, you are trying to dig and reveal and bring out the water that's there already. You're not trying to you don't pour water into the pit that you've dug. You dig until you find water from beneath the earth. So to the connection that is happening between the world and godliness comes from within the world, from the world's reaching out, so to speak, to Hashem. There's a joke about the Dalai Lama. He visited New York City, and he visited the Empire State Building with his flowing robes, and he wanted to try a New York hot dog. You know, they don't eat meat, these people. So he asks this man who was selling hot dogs. They also have this thing, they don't speak. So he passes him a $10 bill and to buy a $5 hot dog. And the hot dog salesman gives him a $5 hot dog. And then Dalai Lama wants to get the change. The guy looks at him and doesn't give him the change. And finally, Dalai Lama says, change. He has to say a word, change. My friend, says the hot dog salesman, change comes from within. So in a similar way with Yitzchak is trying to affect a change from within the world itself. So therefore, it seems that there's a great virtue in Yitzchak. There is. But listen to this. Zion, next page. Mitzad Sheni, on the other hand, precisely because of the change that is affected by the elevation of what is below towards what is above, because of that change element, there's an advantage in what Avram does, in revealing godliness from above to below. What does Avram do? He is pouring the water, so to speak, from above into what is below. It doesn't matter what's happening below. He is going to pour the revelation of Hashem in the lowly place the way it is lowly. He's not waiting for any change. Just like Avraham permeated a recognition of Hashem's greatness by the Arabs in their own love. In the model of Yitzchak's effort to connect the world to godliness, that the world itself should appreciate godliness. So what is he trying to do? He's trying to make people sensitive to their inner spirituality. He's trying to make people aware that they're able to use their mind and heart to connect to Hashem. In that experience, if you would follow Yitzchak and listen to what Yitzchak was telling you, you would be changed. You would leave where you were before and you go closer to his truth. Where you were before could not be illuminated. He needs you to go along with him. He needs you to hold on to his hand to change, to go somewhere else. Avram didn't need that. Avram revealed Hashem to everyone in every station, in the lowest places, also experienced that revelation. This is also the reason why Avram and Yitzchak were different in where they traveled. Avram yotzim Eretz Yisrael v'heisei atzmim Mitzrayim, which is also the difference between their Hasidic counterparts, the Baal Shem Tov, who corresponds to Avram, and the Mitzvah Magid corresponds to Yitzchak. Avram travels around, so does the Baal Shem Tov. Yitzchak does not travel around, and neither did the Mitzvah Magid. Avram leaves Israel and brings himself down to Egypt. To the limitations and the boundaries outside of Israel. He was able to shine outside of Israel as well. That's what Avram does. He could shine in the lowest of places. On the other hand, Yitzchak was forbidden to leave Israel. He was considered to be a sacrifice of God, just like there are laws about animals that once they're consecrated, where they're allowed to move to, were allowed to move around to. So too, Yitzchak was considered a holy sacrifice to God. He only was allowed to be in the part of the world which was already in an elevated state. Eretz Yisrael, not in the lowliness, not in the corporality that existed outside of Israel, not in the concealment, not in the darkness outside of Israel. Isaac had to be in his place, and people had to come to him. From the perspective of Isaac, what is outside of Israel does not have any connection to holiness. All Yitzchak could do is he could invite them to leave where they are to come to where he is. But to reveal godliness in that place, it's insensitive. It can't handle it. But on the other hand, Avram, no. Avram reveals godliness in the places outside of Israel. Now we can understand the difference between the offspring of Isaac and the offspring of Avram and answer our questions. How come when godliness within Avram is transferred to someone otherly, like Yishmael, he may remain spiritual, but he doesn't become Jewish? Whereas when Yitzchak transfers godliness to someone otherly, he may remain Jewish, but he becomes wicked. What's going on? The difference between Avram and Yitzchak is the reason for the difference in their offspring, the difference between Yishmael and Esau. Because Avram is about revealing godliness from above to below, he's able to affect his children who are in the status of really below, of in a lowly, crass kind of persona, and he's able to influence them and make them want to do tshuva. He's able to reach everybody and make even Yishmael, who had left, who was the son of Avram's maidservant, and that more he decided this way of life wasn't for him, and Avram's able to reach him where he is in his lowly state and inspire him to come back to Avram. Avram was able to affect everyone, even Yishmael who had known Avraham and chosen to leave Avram, and yet Avram was able to impact him. This also explains why Avram marrying Hagar is not a contradiction to his manner of serving God. Avram's all about that the lower place still is lower, and he doesn't change the lowliness of that place. He brings Hashem's light to the lowly place. Next page. When Yishmael leaves Avraham, Avram doesn't say, "Oh, it's impossible to get through to this guy. This guy doesn't get it." No, Avram still tries to reach out to him and even asks God, "God, please save Yishmael. Let Yishmael also live in a way of reverence to you." Avram doesn't give up on Yishmael because Avram is able to bring godliness to everyone. Even calls who meshbos Avraham, the Bishameis Avraham Nafal, Hayishmal Lois Allah, Aidekach Lagas Avram, Bumuhushalo, Yotsev from Avram, Lochin, Ein Yochal Yerish Avram, Muyuchalafi, has Beshayishum and Sisishal Medish. However, think about this: what happens after Avram passes away? After Avram passes away, Yishmael falls again. Why does he fall again? Because the entire experience of Yishmael, of him becoming closer to Hashem, was only because of Avraham, and his essence was still separate, as the Torah uses the expression, Yotza mimeni Yishmael. Yishmael leaves Avraham. He's not an Avraham. And that is why he's not able to inherit Avraham. Inheriting Avraham means to be one with the one who bequeaths the inheritance to you. Yishmael cannot be in the place of the inheritor. He's separate from Avraham. He's inspired by Avram when Avram talks to him. When Avram stops talking to him, he's not inspired anymore and he leaves. He can't inherit Avram. There's no inner bond between them. The inheritor cannot bequeath this to Yishmael. Avram can't give this to him because Yishmael doesn't change. However, the service of Yitzchak is different. Yitzchak causes that what is below should ascend. The moment his children were born, without them doing anything, they already considered his children. His service of Hashem involves causing an inner profound change in that which is below. As he transfers his godly energy to his children are already in a state of holiness. And that's why he doesn't marry a maidservant. The idea of marrying a concubine is that the children, the offspring of a concubine, aren't considered as a regular child. That's not what Yitzchak is about. Yitzchak is about making people be on his level, elevating people to him. He stays in Israel and wants to elevate people to come to Israel, elevate people to come to the level of Yitzchak. It's not about bringing it down to the level of where they are, of marrying the maidservant, of going out of his realm and bringing it to a lower place. He's about everyone ascending to his level. And therefore he doesn't marry his maidservant. And therefore the halacha is about Esau. Esau was Jewish, and Esau could inherit Isaac. It's only because of the deal he made with Yaakov that he lost the inheritance. But technically he would have inherited just like Yaakov. But all that we just mentioned only refers to the head of Esau, the higher part of Esau, the way Esau is in his divine source and root. But when the head of Esau is attached to the body, which means when this divine source now is connected to the lower place, who Yotzin from Yitzchak, he becomes separate and different and other to Yitzchak, in a way that he has no connection at all to holiness. He never returns. And that's why it says a clip of Esau is worse than the clip of Ishmael. Although Esau is Jewish, but his clip is worse. He loses any connection to Avraham, to Yitzchak. He totally has a higher divine entity in him, but when that divine entity converges with his persona, there is no change in his persona. On the contrary, he becomes the Esau that he was, and he never wants to come back. There's no inner bond and inner change. There's an inner bond. There's no inner change in Esau's persona. Esau doesn't change. The service of Avram and the service of Isaac are a preparation for Yaakov. Yaakov contains within him both the energy of Abraham and the energy of Yitzchak. On the one hand, Yaakov also traveled to outside of Israel. He lowered himself to the place that was lower. But he didn't just try to illuminate that place. He raised his family there. He didn't just try to impact that place and just reveal godliness in that place. He created the 12 tribes in the lowest place. And that's why he was able to marry a maidservant, to marry concubines. And yet his concubines don't produce servants, his concubines produce children. On the one hand, he is like Avram, was able to go to a realm outside of holiness, which is expressed by marrying someone who isn't part of his family, so to speak, a concubine. On the other hand, what does he produce from this concubine? He produces branches of his own tree, not just branches of his own tree, branches of Hashem. So Yitzchak has Yaakov has the perfection of both the energies of Avram and the energies of Yitzchak. Lefia Omer Yuvan Gam, Madua Chilga Godo B'Parsha still this B'Shu Esel Lefia Medish B'Daber is Achonas Brachas Yitzchak Val Brachas Gam Bakach Bizbat Dosei Yitzchak B'Keshel Esau. Now we can understand why, and try to paraphrase it from the Hebrew for the rest of the talk. Now we can understand why the lion's share of this Torah portion is about Esau, and according to the Medrash, we began to talk of this Sikha with, the word told us is written without the letter Vav, highlighting that we're talking about the deficient child of Yitzchak, we're talking about Esau. So this Torah portion, which is about Esau, the reason we're talking about Esau, again, is because we want to highlight what's special about Yitzchak, that he does produce an Esau. There is a different kind of revelation of godliness that he has in Avram. That's why he produces a Jewish son. Now we can understand the subject matter of this week's Torah portion. What is the subject matter of this week's Torah portion? It talks about the blessings of Yitzchak, the content of the blessings. Why? Because this also expresses the specific model of Isaac's service to God and how that affects vis-a-vis Esau. Yitzchak wanted to bless Esau. although he knew who Esau was. Why did he want to bless Esau? He knew who Esau was. Why? The Torah says because Esau had game in his mouth. People misinterpret this to mean that Esau bribed Yitzchak with the game, with the food that he brought him. The Rebbe once said those who say this have to go to the Maras Machpelah, to the burial site of Isaac, and ask forgiveness from him to think that Chas v'shalom, he was bribed by his son. Rather, the meaning of game, the meaning of the hunting of Esau is that Yitzchak saw that there are divine sparks in Esau. He saw the head of Esau. He saw the incredible divine root and source of the sparks of godliness of Esau. And because of that, he wanted to hunt them down and capture them and bring them to holiness. He saw that out of Esau would emerge the famous Talmudic sage, Rabbi Meir. He saw that Onkelos would come from Esau. And therefore, Yitzchak rather, who his service of Hashem was about digging wells, digging for the living water that's found beneath the surface, Yitzchak wanted, by blessing Esau, he wanted to dig into Esau and to reveal in Esau and to find the living waters, to find the holy sparks of Hashem within Esau. He thought by blessing him, he'll be able to unearth the holy sparks of Hashem in Esau. The way Esau appeared to Yitzchak, Esau was deserving of this. But the way Esau really was in truth, Yitzchak sees in Esau the divine sparks in him. But looking at the reality of Esau on the ground, he's not deserving of this. He has left the realm of Yitzchak. He's not a vessel for these blessings. And therefore the blessings were given to Yaakov. But only Yaakov it's not that Hashem gave them, Yitzchak gave them to Yaakov and not to Esau. It's Yitzchak gave them to Yaakov for the purpose of Yaakov elevating Esau. What's the message for us? Lesson for us like this, in a very simple message, the Rebbe says. Esau existed before the Torah was given. And yet he's called Jewish. He's called a son of Yitzchak. Despite the fact that he was a renegade, despite the fact that he was really not a good person, but yet Yitzchak didn't give up on him. He tried to dig into him to find the goodness in him. How much more so is this true? We're talking about Jews that are alive today after the Torah is given, despite the fact that they're the way they look, al tabet al mareu, don't look at the way they seem. Really, there is anoichi avaya. There is etched into every Jew the words that God told us at the giving of the Torah, I am the Lord your God. And especially when you consider the fact that most of the Jews in our generation, the fact that they've decided to have a lifestyle that's contrary to Torah is not because of their own fault. It's because they're in the category of what halacha terms as a child who has been captured by Gentiles. It's not because they are have left Yiddishkeit and it's their fault. On the contrary, there's something intrinsically good about, not just about their soul, but about their behavior. It's not their fault. Therefore, it's certain that we need to devote ourselves to bring all Jews closer to Hashem, even those who seem very far from Yiddishkeit. We have to dig and be patient and to find the living waters that are in every Jew. At the same time, we have to also be conscious of the manner to do this, the way to do this. Someone asked the previous Rebbe once, how come you don't do, I don't know exactly what he was asking about, but I imagine his question was like about what many other Jewish groups have done to bring people, young people in, make, events that aren't so modest, make dance parties for young boys and girls so that get them involved in Judaism, make them want to be part of Jewish life. So the previous Rebbe, he told the previous Rebbe, when there is a fire burning, it doesn't matter if the water is clean or dirty. So the previous Rebbe responded, okay, that's true. It doesn't matter if the water is clean or dirty, but you have to look and make sure that you're pouring water, not pouring gasoline, which means that what you may be using to bring them closer may actually cause them to go farther because young people are idealistic. And when you lower the bar and you change the Torah towards them, you're basically telling them that what you have is meaningless. So the way to do this is in the language of our ethics of our fathers, not to bring the Torah close to people. Love people, love creatures, love everybody, even someone who's only called a creature of Hashem, but bring them close to Torah. It's forbidden to make any compromises in the Torah and its commandments, even when you think that by making this compromise, you're going to bring someone closer to Torah. The Hebrew word for compromise, amasla, is related to two words. Amasla is made up of two words. Emes loy, it's not true. If something can be compromised, it's not true. Idealistic people want truth, and therefore you're not going to be successful. You have to give the Torah the way it is, that subtracting from Torah without adding to Torah. You can't make compromises. And that's why Rashi says in the beginning of the sixth Torah portion, the subject matter of this sixth Torah portion is Yaakov and Esav, who are discussed in the Parsha. What kind of Esav is a child of Yitzchak? The Esav who is discussed in Torah. The way to reach out to Esav is with Torah, the way Torah is. Yaakov doesn't use his own methods. Yaakov and Esav are discussed in Torah. That's what causes Esav to become a child of Yitzchak. So the key is we have to look at everyone looking at their head, just like there is the head of Esav. To look at a Jew the way he is in his divine roots. Don't look at the external, the nitty-gritty of way things seem. Al tabet mareu. Look at his head. Look at his inner core. Look at his essence. How he really wants to keep the Torah inside. And with that kind of perspective, you will. And I just let you leave you guys with this incredible analogy I heard. Imagine if you hear that there's a treasure on an island, and you know exactly where the treasure is, and you have a map, and you go and you search for the treasure, and after a day goes by and you're searching, you're at first, really excited to come to the island, but after looking there for a day, you get despondent. Maybe there is no treasure here. After a week, you get even more upset. Then after a month, after a year, you're like, there's for sure no treasure here. But imagine if you knew for sure there was a treasure there. You knew for sure. Every day you get more and more excited. You're getting closer and closer to the treasure. That's who the Rebbe is. The Rebbe is a tzaddik who sees the godliness and holiness in every single Jew. And that's why when George Rohr told the Rebbe that he made this event to bring people who are far from Torah closer to Torah, the Rebbe didn't accept that sentence. The Rebbe said, how can you call them far from Torah? You have to tell them they're the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the daughters of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. The Rebbe sees who they are, and therefore, just like in the analogy of the treasure, every day there's more excitement. Just go a little deeper. It's there. So that's how we are able to inspire others, by realizing there's a treasure there. They may look like they're an Esav, but the head is holy. There's something deeper that is maybe not seen on the outside, but that perspective, we're able to find and have patience to find the living waters within. And have a wonderful Shabbos, Dr. Bressman, Chomar Beryl, and LG Stylo 4, whoever you are. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Sei gesund.